just finished the exam. We're now in the next section on global and local cultures. How the decline of the welfare state and the rise of civil society varies, especially locally, but also nationally. Read closely on the syllabus. That is, the last two sections, we're dealing with connecting now the pieces from the section on values from Elazar and Lipset with the general idea from Tocqueville of organizational participation, with third, where and how these things combine to generate maybe legitimacy and or the loss of legitimacy, which is the bowling alone title. That is, where and how do we have individualism? Is it taking so strong a perspective that we are losing the common good, civility, and potentially more conflictual relations among individuals as well as societies? Okay, this is conflicting, strongly worded interpretations which we're finding talk shows, books, debates going on about right now around the world. Certainly with the election of Trump, but then that in turn stimulating discussions of the Europeans, or right now we have these deep divisions within the political parties. England, France, Germany, no majority for any single dominant view, and the traditional rules of the game are breaking down. Okay, that's careful. Yeah, it doesn't fall off the edge there. That's all. Okay. The big point of the course: global, local politics. Where and how can we put these global with national differences, and then especially the local as an alternative to each of those, where and how these can combine. And these are what we're doing by building up the sections of the course. And so we have in the civic organizations and the different types of these, first markets, civic organizations, leading to the weakening of those into scenes which can become highly individualized. They're not even joining organizations. That idea that the new social movements are breaking down of the Tocquevillian conception, I didn't play up so much then, but I'm now playing it up here because we've got alternatives and the values connecting with different types of variables like hierarchy, and that's what we want to stress this section this week. Okay, the readings which make these points are Tocqueville, Putnam, Clark on Tocqueville, Clark and 17, whatever it is, co-authors, Tocqueville Karaoke, and then the Scenescapes book, which we'll talk more Wednesday. Okay, these all fit together, and I've given you an overview. The propositions which are guiding so many of these things are also in the syllabus, and you can see how the pieces fit together. I don't have enough time to go through all of these details, but you do have these written out and an overview in the syllabus itself. The books, of course, give you the details. Okay. One simple point, which I'll elaborate as we go on, is to say that we can think about three kinds of politics: clientelism, class politics, and the new political culture. Three types: clientelism, class politics, and new political culture. Globalization encourages movement from 1 to 2 to 3. Globalization through the internet, through markets, through travel, through studying abroad, weakens the traditional personal relationships, especially visible in the family and strongest in Asia and the Middle East. The clientelism, class, NPC, we've talked about a bit. We'll talk about in different pieces as we proceed, and especially changes with these. Globalization, moving these down. Okay. With the multiple dimensions of globalization ranging from AI to markets to travel to cell phones. I elaborate after considering Tocqueville and especially France in contrast to the US, showing that these more general points are now important globally, even though Tocqueville saw some of these. In around 1820, 1830, he came to the US. He sees, well, he came here as a French aristocrat to try to understand for what's coming for France, because we had no democracy. Then we had 1789, they had a huge revolution. They beheaded the elite, top aristocrats, and so forth in France. What will bring this? Because the revolution in France was not at all the kind of participatory, democratic operating system. It was a guillotine followed by Napoleon's military. That's not what you have in the US Constitution. You could say it's almost the opposite. Why? Because, and that's what I want to elaborate, what made France so different, and what does it have implications for, say, China today? Hierarchy, and where and how hierarchy varies and interpenetrates these other things is a big theme today. But let's add specifics. Tocqueville focused initially on equality found in all democracies, but it was absent in France. The most extreme being the the Napoleonic militaristic version. It's easy to spread the doctrine of equality via television and simple laws. Make everybody the same. Treat everyone equally. If people have more money than another, or more cars, or more food, or this or that, it's bad. It's in that sense. There's a sense of moralism is also being introduced here. Egalitarianism brings a sense of if it's not equal, it's wrong. That's a moralistic conception, which was heightened by Christianity, by Jesus and others, but there were other elements, of course, in the Bible, in the ancient Jews, which as we saw as well. One aspect which Weber played up was how much did the Jewish prophets emerge fighting against hierarchies, Syria, Egypt, and so forth. This continues today. Okay, but the theme, one theme which Weber stressed was I gave you long quotes on this, was the degree to which what this brought into the global way of potentially handling hierarchy is to fight with it with morality, not with killing the enemy, but with saying you are bad, you are wrong, and then developing this as a moralistic kind of attack on hierarchy, but without and doing it with pamphlets, with speeches, with looking for converts, in the extreme version, religion, a new religion, Christianity in this case. It's less easy to develop the concept of liberty or freedom in contrast to equality, which Tocqueville notes that the American conception of individualism differs from the French. The French, and so French himself, talked about egoism as a more commonly thought of as the desire of an individual, in the sense of what's different, that at least especially in the New England version, the Calvinist branch, includes the common good. The term, the state, it's not called the state, it's called the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The Commonwealth is a deep conception which is critical for the New England moralism and which is now spreading around the world. But where and how can the common good combine with these other things? And the connection which Tocqueville pointed out, and which has then been stressed more through Putnam today and many others talking about the decline of civic organizations, is the civic organization can combine the sense of the common good with a single individual. The classic example, the two Massachusetts farmer and a herdsman, whatever, agree to build a fence together. Two people, not just individualistic, they build a common good in that way. Okay, an innovation to build the common good by two people starting together is a conceptualization, Tocqueville says, is unimaginable in France. Why not? Napoleon outlawed voluntary associations. Large meetings were illegal through most of the 19th century. There was a famous book by Roger Shattuck, Princeton historian, leading to many dinners, and it was called The Banquet Years. Banquet years in the 19th century were that in the 19th century in France, people could have big banquets, and then between the lines they could be doing politics or revolution or criticizing the establishment, or building up a new alternative, but mixing it with food and with dinners, the banquet years. The associations which may be doing this in the U.S., especially the little churches, many different branches of Protestant variations, were doing what the French were doing around food. And I would add food, restaurants, cafes. And I made that point briefly, that the English with their coffee houses version, they don't call them cafes there, they call them coffee houses in England, because their different institutions, different cultures. And the French version had more of an aristocratic residue, not to talk about politics, because you'd be arrested if you talked about politics in a French cafe, or if you had a pamphlet. You can't pass out pamphlets. No, you go to jail. So Marx tried to go to Paris, lived there for a while, but he got basically kicked out, so he had to go to England. Too bad. So boring, he thought, but he wrote Marxism. Okay. The associations are not necessary in France. The society has so socially dense neo-feudal obligations, especially the hierarchy sense of duty. You must do this. And you had this not just in France, but you have it in China. You have it this in Egypt. You have it in many other places. One which is most written about articulately is in Japan, where Ruth Benedict in World War II wrote this terrific book called The Chrysanthemum and the Sword. The flower and the sword combine in Japanese culture in ways that she then elaborates, that shows, for example, if you have a wedding, a party, but say an official wedding in a small town, wherever in Japan, a representative of the mayor will be there to write down how many bottles of wine each person in the village gave to the marrying couple. How many boxes of rice are given? And if it's written down, it's with the idea that they will be reciprocated. This is an extreme version of clientelism. You give me this, I give you that. I may give you wine, maybe I want to vote in the political system, or to support me in the military. If brothers or sisters do not properly meet the obligations of the family, the siblings in the next generation may have to take it over. And this kind of carrying over this is thought of in Tocqueville as Japanese and non-American, but Tocqueville left out the South. The American South was a weaker version of what you have with the family carrying over obligations generation to generation, and these linked with race and slavery, and these are the details which we have elaborated in William Faulkner's 4 or 5, especially great novels. I'll just mention one update in the sense of the content to make my general point. But we can have these historic institutions and rules of the game which were elaborated separately for the feudal institution of slavery, for class politics and unions later, fighting against industrialization and so forth. And then third, this kind of values, moralism, social issues, diversification that we have with a new political culture. These kinds of things overlap and I'll give you one example. I was working with a collaborator, Vincent Hoffman Martino, when we did the new political culture. We were working on that book and related things. He was in Bordeaux. I was in Paris teaching there for twice. And each time we wanted to do a data analysis, a table, he had to come to Paris to use the computer because they had the program which we then called SPSS, and they had no copy of this program in Bordeaux. How many hours? I've forgotten how many hours, but many hours on the train from Bordeaux all the way to Paris to make one table. Maybe spend a night there. We'd work a little more, then he'd go back to Bordeaux. Okay, to do one table. I'm just pointing out okay, so then I knew that this was going on. So in another trip, I was able to get a copy of a new revolutionary little institution called SPSS for a personal computer. Have a personal computer, an SPSS. And I said, look, you don't need to come all the way to Paris. So I took it to Bordeaux, and we talked with the secretary of the organization. It's the Institute of Political Science, University of Bordeaux, and he had been. I'll just add in passing. The secretary had been the previous director of wines in Bordeaux. Bordeaux is known in the world for wine, and he taught a course called General Culture for people who could be political scientists, or more often lawyers, political leaders, mayors all over southern France, and so forth. So he wanted it to. When he saw that this was what this could do, he said, "I want to teach SPSS as part of general culture. This should be part of French and world general culture, and I want to include this." And so the concierge, the guard who was working on the weekend when I was trying to install the program, said, he's a militant communist. He was fighting with the administration. No, we don't want anybody here to you're overtime. And I said, I'm going to need at least another hour to do this. No, you got so we brought in the Secretary General to persuade the concierge that I could keep working for a little bit longer. Okay, flash forward. The director of the SPSS is installed. the director of the institute said, we're going to have SPSS only for our little branch of this university, for part of it. And anybody else who wants it, no, they've got to go to Paris. So in that sense, clientelism, quid pro quo. The Secretary General, by contrast, he wanted to teach for everybody and talk about this as part of general culture. Okay, so you have these kinds of conflicts between clientelism and then something which becomes more complicated. The point is to bring out the continuing effort of who claims the property to narrowly circumscribe its use, and the culture of what is turf or what is appropriate, what is legitimate in context. I could have instead talked to you about the family of Donald Trump, but I'm giving you this example to say, or Musk, as we had this conversation. These things are penetrating there because they are conflicting norms, what we can call the rules of the game. And so what are the legitimate rules of the game are hot issues right now between Musk and the Justice Department. So should the Justice Department turn over the Treasury data for all the individuals, for the IRS, to Musk or not? Okay, so this is a direct parallel of this, which goes back to the Japanese writing down who owes what. That is, Putnam holds that associations create, and I'll introduce a concept here, social capital. What is social capital? This comes back from Chicago. Gary Becker did his PhD on human capital, and human capital, which he introduced seriously, was basically measured as education. People who were trained more with more education may have in their heads the ability to be entrepreneurial, more individualistic, and more innovative, not just in the sense of hair color, but writing new programs, thinking new original ideas, and then measuring innovation. So how to do this? Becker stressed human capital, and that continues today. Corollary of this was developed by Pierre Bourdieu in France and James Coleman here in Chicago to talk about social capital, not just human capital of individuals atomistically defined, but social capital which join people in their relations to one another through networks, through organizations, family, and so forth. And the social capital, big point of Putnam is is that organizations can lead to social capital, which in turn leads to people participating in these legitimacy. So the causal paths, organization, social class, legitimacy. Okay, and so Putnam then stresses this is the Tocquevillian model, and I will use in the same way to interpret Italy. Okay, so Putnam had a house that lived in southern Italy, and I was interested in trying to elaborate this kind of perspective, and the creative argument of Putnam stressing, and I'm using Tocqueville ideally to contrast him as the author of Bowling Alone, which we've talked about, versus this book on Italy. He does lots of things here, before and after Bowling Alone, creatively, which I would say are the subtle Putnam, which we can build on more valuably. But the way that he applies it to to Italy, but then with more generalizing, with a generalizing eye, which others have then extended. That is, the title of the book is not about Italy. The title is Making Democracy Work. That's a big title. Okay, his wife, Putnam built on, to try to build on these things, Putnam built on a book by Edward Banfield. Okay, Banfield had been was from Connecticut, came here, got a doctorate, did invaluable studies of cities, of local issues, and then continued here and at Harvard, but Banfield's wife was Italian American, and when he had a sabbatical, they spent a year in southern Italy. He then wrote a book, which I mentioned to you once before, The Moral Basis of a Backward Society, which is still sold in all kinds of airports in Italian translation. The moral basis of a backward society. So the idea of morality becomes, and then to say backward implies it's not developing using markets or international institutions or kinds of things. It's somehow connected with the past, backward, but where and how does this work? The bottom line, which then Putnam picks up on further, is trust. Banfield documents the extreme version of no trust in this little village or small town, where his wife's family then gave him all kinds of examples, and he got to know the people and detail. So I gave you the example that if a farmer would go into a farmer wanted rain, didn't have rain, he would go into the church with a candle and shake it in front of it used to be in the pre-Christian institutions, there were gods, or there were we can call them gods or saints or institutions in favor of rain. And so in the Roman Catholic Church, you have a carrying on of these pre-Christian multiple gods having their institutional orientations of having rain, harvest versus fertility, or another one for Valentine's Day, etc. The point of that is a quick bottom line, ironically, the farmer would then shake the candle and say, "Listen, Saint, I'll burn my castle, I'll burn your castle, I'll burn my candle for you to celebrate religion here, only after you give me rain." Low trust. Okay. Between wives and husbands, between children, among lawyers, etc. Which works, or which institutions try to fill this gap in southern Italy? The mafia. We'll give you, violence. We'll kill people if they don't give us business. Our business is protecting you. We want to protect you. But we'd like to have a little bit of cash to remind the importance of keeping you safe. And so the mafia continues in much of the world today. Latin America, Mexico, maybe chunks of Asia and so forth are still doing these kinds of things. So violence. systematic violence can then be taken over by the military. And so military dictators were widespread, for instance, in Latin America. They were in Korea for a amount of time. Chiang Kai-shek was seen as a variation of that. Okay, the third that is the military, the violence, and the bureaucracy, a tough bureaucracy which could be ideally imposed to try to build something which will check up people around the ideals such as egalitarianism. If we want to make things more equal, or you want to implement the views of the king, the dictator, these were combined in southern Italy by the Normans, when the Normans did not have the ethnic background. They had their blonde hair, so you still have southern blonde hair people in southern Italy coming from these Normans. But the point is, how to capture this in a simple quantitative way. Putnam had a smart idea in this book, was to send out questionnaires in all of the different regions across Italy, and it said, could you please send me this simple form from the local government. It came right back, and you got the form in central and northern Italian cities, Florence, Venice, so forth. It worked well. The bureaucracy works efficiently. Further south in Rome, a little further south, maybe you'd send a second form, a second request. Still don't get anything. You maybe knock on the door. Maybe you could get something there. But you go further south, you go in person, say, and maybe there was an expectation in the past. Either you knew someone or you made a cash contribution. Then maybe you could get something, but probably, usually not at all. You just try to buy stamps in a big post office. I mean, I was teaching in Florence. You could have 20 people in line waiting to buy some stamps, and the person would be drinking coffee or talking with others. That is, the sense of, quote, efficient bureaucracy was far apart. Let me thus conceptualize these bits of anecdotes that I'm giving you to suggest that a critical alternative omitted by Putnam is what I stress with civic organizations, churches leading to social capital, leading to legitimacy. What that leaves out is other things. That is, it's a simple, it's a two linear kind of model, and it's the core of this book, Bowling Alone. But pieces of other things can be seen in this book called Making Democracy Work, and later on his later books on religion, at least on religion. That is, where and how could different kinds of things transform the operation of Tocqueville? So we're getting closer here to things like this. That is, Tocqueville's not working right. Okay. So how's that for distance? Okay. Okay. Where did this book come from? This came from a PhD thesis, University of Chicago in sociology. Seoko Kim, Wono Jang had also done a PhD here. Joseph Yee also did a PhD here on related issues. That is, we started talking with people who knew this. I'm sorry, but like the PhD, Seoko Kim. He knew about Tocqueville. He knew about bowling along, so forth. He said, let me test this. He was Korean. He analyzed the data. The data we then there's a branch of the NORC, the National Opinion Research Center, has a branch called the ISSP, the International Social Programs, doing the same kinds of surveys in other countries of the world. That way you can compare specific value answers to questions asked the same question in China, Korea, Japan, and the US and France and Italy. Okay. When he analyzed this, does it work that if we have more civic organizations, does that build legitimacy? So he looks at it with the Korean data. Koreans who go more to church, because there are a lot, that is, Koreans join more organizations than do Americans, especially churches. They're very active. Does this build legitimacy? No, it fails. Tocqueville's wrong in Korea. And then we started to talk to others. How about Japan? How about China? People, no, it doesn't work. That is, well, he had the same data. He analyzed the same questions the same question for those other Asian countries, and then he had some data for something like 80 countries in the rest of the world. And the dramatic finding was Tocqueville fails in Asia. It's weaker in Southern Europe. It works more strongly in Northern Europe, in Protestant areas, and it works strongest of all in New England within the US. But it may become weaker because they have less of these kinds of organizations in the American South. Okay. So we have a causal model. This is what we've talked about many times in this course. We're looking at causal A leads to B leads to C. But then we say, where and why does globalization or cross-national and cross-city differences generate differences? The context, the scene, transforms the causal dynamics. That's what we see here in the Sioko Kim's PhD. With these findings, so he didn't have a theory at that point. He had these findings. Hey, these are important, but why does it work? Okay, so Wono Jang was another guy. He was working with the mayor of Seoul, and he had a conference on this. So we had follow up. Richard Florida, I and others were met with the people in Seoul for several days, and at the end of the conference, basically hearing these kinds of findings, Florida said they can't get it. That is, and I'm bringing in Florida to say, could we lower those a bit, maybe down to about an inch on those two, so that we're all a little cool. Florida's writing about the rise of the creative class, stresses innovation, entrepreneurship, and economic growth follows and is the key driver of entrepreneurship in the economy in the world today. I mean and so many other people are saying that. There's a literature on this in many different kinds of industries and so forth, or industrial categories. Florida went back to said they don't have it. There's something wrong with the Koreans, and so whereas my answer to Florida was, listen, they've got great economic growth in Asia, China, Korea. They're booming economically, but there's something wrong with our theories if we're not using the theory that came from the West. Florida, Jane Jacobs, Schumpeter, these things are somehow different in Asia. And so I stayed on for a couple of weeks and tried to ask, where and why are things different here? And after those couple of weeks, I then realized this is complicated. I can't find an answer certainly in a conference or in a couple of weeks. So we spent, I think it was 10 years writing this book. And we have I think there are 14 co-authors, and most of them are Asian plus Portuguese, because one of our findings was there's a big difference between Portugal, which was like Korea in the sense that legitimacy does not increase by civic participation, whereas in Spain it did a little bit. Spain and Portugal are right next to each other. Everybody thinks of them as the same, but they're different. Why? So I got together with Felipe Carreira da Silva, who is a PhD from Cambridge on the faculty there and in Portugal. And he had then a couple of assistants who we worked with and did a lot of data analysis, which is summarized through sections of this book. So with these smart co-authors, we put together different pieces of this. One more, and it's appropriate to put in here that we Peter Achterberg, a Dutchman, did a PhD on the same idea as the new political culture. He came up with it largely independently, and then we worked together as he learned more about it. He spent a summer here in Chicago, and we said, there's something wrong with what Putnam's doing. Let's take a look at his data. So Putnam. We got Putnam's data and other similar data, where we could look at these kinds of things, where we had these initial findings from the Korean student's PhD. Where and why do these things vary? So one thing we did was to say, what kinds of organizations are growing or declining and related to social characteristics, youth, and especially young people. So that is, some people are not, young people tend to join fewer of the established organizations, and they're not the high officers. I mean, they're really at the beginning. However, if you look at this campus, where do we have people creating new organizations? Stand-up comedy, painting, writing poetry, art stuff. Right across the Midway, this is brand new, this is called the Logan Center. They put on all kinds of artistic activity. That institution, that building was not there 20 years ago, 30 years ago. The USC didn't do anything like this in a serious way. If you wanted to do more art stuff, you'd go to Harvard, Yale, or Princeton. You wouldn't come to Chicago. And now Chicago's reversed that. We're doing more arts, and we're attracting more smart, artistically sensitive students to come here than because you can get more of this right here. Nevertheless, the faculty, we're in the social sciences, haven't really gotten this message. They're getting it slowly, but we're trying to help. Okay, and how can we have a better, sharper framework? And so the title of the book is Can Tocqueville Karaoke? So let's not throw Tocqueville out altogether. Let's say how can we teach Tocqueville to sing karaoke? So he's got a microphone. He learns how to dance. So Tocqueville can learn. Okay, Tocqueville can learn to do karaoke, and then in turn the Chinese can learn to do innovation and transform karaoke of a traditional manner into something which can become more artistically innovative, more theatrical. They can have better outfits. And so we have one student who has, we're going to circulate. Could, why don't you just wave briefly and mention your name? Can we flash the camera on over there?
I'm Rafi. Hello.
Say it a little bit louder.
I'm Rafi.
Rafi, what's your last name?
Nahan.
Nahan. Rafi Nahan. Okay, can you stand up? Can you stand up and maybe show them so people can see the outfit? Okay.
Right now.
All right, so we got the time is there. He's got an overcoat. Below the overcoat, we got a a serious, a traditional American business leadership. The General Motors, law firms, and so forth. White shirt, tie, which you don't see on the UC campus anymore, at least among students. And the pants.
The pants are also a little bit of a clock theme, and the sneakers are purple.
Purple. Okay.
On a juxtaposition going on.
A juxtaposition. Okay, there we go. Susan Sontag, campiness, alienation from Brecht, all on his outfit. Okay, that is, Tocqueville has got to learn how to do what Rafi is.
Learn how to karaoke.
Okay, say that again.
You gotta learn how to.
Got to learn karaoke. There we go. Okay. So, and if you feel you'd like to have a few more points on your grade for the course, and you don't feel you did it perfectly on the midterm exam, you can do extra participation. And here's one example in creating that kind of dress. Okay. That is, why are we focusing here on karaoke? Because in the discussions with the students, the 15 or so co-authors of this book, Peter, and more specifically, Peter Octoberg came to Chicago. We analyzed the data. And what did we see? What kinds of organizations were increasing the same or decreasing around the world, and especially in the US, which Putnam had then written about with Bowling Alone. And we found for young people, we found the opposite. Young people are creating and more actively doing artistic things than they did in the past and than their parents did. And so I mentioned the Logan Center is an illustration, and the outfit which you can create yourself. You can bring an aesthetic, artistic eye to do anything else, like how you dress when you go to class, or other kinds of things, such as what do you want to write, not just equations, maybe poetry. How do you teach this to when someone is, say, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old? When you want to teach younger kids, you can't teach them how to write mathematical formulas very advanced, but you can give them a paintbrush. They can draw stuff, pictures, painting. Doing the arts are ways that kids are 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old can start to to think about individual creativity. Innovation can be a training ground instead of saying memorize the Quran or memorize this and do it in the same way. And if you memorize these historical documents, historical dates, names, memorize all the 50 states, who are their governors, and who are all the presidents in the U.S. If you memorize this and then you study a language, memorize the vocabulary, learn the grammatical rules. That is, these kinds of traditional aspects of education are reversed when we got to the University of Chicago laboratory school, founded by, first leader really was Dewey, Thomas Dewey, part of the pragmatist school, and the idea was one of the leading places called progressive education. It would train and encourage innovation, not to memorize, not to do things in hierarchical manner from the past, but to say, what should we do today? What do you want to do? What do you want to learn from? And this is now carrying, so that was around 1890 they started. This is now carrying on around progressive education. The Danes, the people in Denmark, are going so far they no longer require homework at all. And the surveys show that the Danish students love to go to school. Okay, things like some of these aspects of innovation, entrepreneurship, combined with equality, are potentially conflicting moralistic orientations. So we have trying to just, well, I can introduce more propositions, but I'm trying to keep it focused on the core ideas are in the syllabus, as I mentioned. Let me mention another, that is, we need more work on social science, not just individualistic creativity, or the core atomistic view of the market where we have individual private persons doing what they want. They want to have a different pair of pants, different color of shoes, and so forth. Where and how can we build some propositions about where and how institutions work? We spent 10 years on this, which came, and I'm just going to summarize at this point. Centralization encourages public goods, but decentralization generates separable goods, or more private goods. Private goods can be just the narrow definition of shoes, but separable goods are what the kinds of things, say, what does a city government do? A city government can have air pollution control, which cover the whole geographic area, or you can have fees which you charge if you want to open a business. And so if you want to have a new restaurant, you've got to have an inspector. It will be inspected regularly for health purposes, etc. And then you'll pay fees for that. And cities like Chicago do a lot. They raise a lot of money instead of having income tax. So income tax are relatively low in here, or were. The battle, if you will, in the last few days is especially the city of Chicago, and then the state and the county have all been attacked by Trump, and we have had public responses from the governor of Illinois, my former student Tony Preckwinkle, who's president of the Cook County County, and then the city, the mayor, former organizer of the teachers union activist activities. I'll also add a footnote to that. There are now certain counties in the state of Illinois, 5 of them, 70% roughly, have voted that they want to leave the state of Illinois and they want to become part of Indiana, because Indiana is closer to Trump. Okay, so we have these divisions. So I'm pointing out, as we get down to local, counties to cities to neighborhoods, we get different patterns, and people are fighting with each other. But there are many differences. What difference does it make for government services? If you want to deal with air pollution, you need a bigger area. You can't just have one service which goes to just one business and charging one person or one business. But if we're dealing, and so if we're dealing with policies that are more public goods, that favor more people, and to which the access is not able to be easily charged a private fee or a level of tax. Centralization is a good thing, such as fighting wars, air pollution, defending yourself and trying to have peace. By contrast, decentralization tends to encourage more and generate more successfully individual results. So if people want to have shoes that match their particular outfit and have a particular color combination, that tends to work better with smaller institutions, or some people will talk about this is where government can do it less well and private institutions cannot. But there are plenty of big organizations, so I wouldn't say government is the only institution, but the question is the size of the unit, the size of the government, or the size of the agency is what can be critical. Mansur Olson wrote a fair amount about size in that sense. So size is one thing to pay attention to, but I would say less important than size alone is what's the size dynamic, and part of it is central control. So if you have an authoritarian military hierarchy, which is top down in a very strict way, you can tend to have, at least you try to implement, such as egalitarianism, that everybody should have a more equal income or more equal education. And China, for instance, has recently abolished the special schools for private training of students to get into universities, to get into colleges within China or internationally. So, and these are very major institutions in Asia. So in the book we have sections on economic development and politics, and the politics part is more on is more Tocqueville, as we discussed, of building legitimacy and trust as an output. Whereas the economic development part, which I mentioned with Richard Florida, with innovation, with Schumpeter, Jane Jacobs, and we have chapters on each of these where people were then trying to see where and how these things work. And the third variable, the third big factor which we discovered with October was the arts. That the arts can transform and heighten and improve, strengthen certain relationships, both for the economy and for the political system. And that's what joins the pieces of the three pieces in the book. And so Tocqueville can learn to dance. He can learn to use a microphone. He can learn to sing, as well as but Putnam doesn't have that. So Putnam's discussion of Tocquevillian dynamics omits the arts. And so what we're saying, these other variables omitted by some of the earlier analyses can be strengthened if we add and what does the arts mean? It can mean more feeling, more figure, more imagery, painting, architecture, streets, how things look as a scene in that sense of a photograph kind of scene, or the theatrical scene in a Shakespearean play. Where and how these can be joined is what we have the beginnings of in the chapters here, and the examples we've heard through the course as we're progressing, and I'm going to say we will elaborate more on Wednesday. But any comments or questions which you folks want to raise? No. Okay. You sure? Okay, other points that I have skipped over, I'll come back to. Several of these ideas about joining the public goods with centralization, I'll mention, I developed in conjunction with Eleanor Ostrom, O-S-T-R-O-M. She was the first woman non-economist to get a Nobel Prize in economics for her work, which provided an answer to it's an example of the ways that we can develop alternatives to the answer of Samuelson and Kenneth Arrow in the 40s, 50s, 60s, basically said economists can't analyze politics because it's too much. It has too many aspects to it that the normal mechanisms for the core mechanisms of trying to have competition, market dynamics, freedom of information, perfect information being assumed, that these sorts of dynamics fail, and therefore leave out, don't do politics if we want to use economic tools. And Eleanor Ostrom, I and others are saying, no, we want to join politics, we want to join these collective aspects, but it means transforming some of the more general theories with adding specific mechanisms, such as the simple proposition of centralization encourages public goods is an illustration of going beyond Samuelson's kind of statement that public goods can't, public goods can be strategized. That is, people can lie and say, how much do you want to have clean air? How much will you be willing to pay to have higher taxes to have cleaner air? And so people can not only say, but they may or may not do what they say, and that incentive and the inability to get the two things to be separated out through a market process led Samuelson to say, don't. So what we have with what Eleanor Ostrom has really elaborated is how mechanisms have been developed, especially for generating water in the third world countries of the world, and where there are things which are working, which do have collective decisions, where people join and work with each other, and they don't just lie and cheat and steal and run away. So the Banfield kind of conception of Southern Italy and the mafia, even the mafia, the mafia as an institution has a sense of family and loyalty among certain individuals within the mafia as an organization itself. Movies elaborated by this. Okay, we are at the end of our time. We will continue on Wednesday and explore more the scenescapes analysis and build on what we've covered today. See you Wednesday.